Are you an entrepreneur wanting to grow your influence but getting overwhelmed by the details? Check out the Resilient Events Show, where co-hosts Marisa Cali, head of production at Be Present Events, and John Harris, founder of Buzzit Event Sites, talk strategy, technology, and execution for using podcasts, live streams, and events to establish expertise in any industry. Don't miss Resilient Events, only on 100 TV.
Welcome to the Resilient Events Show on the 100 TV network. My name is John Harris. I'm co-founder of Buzzit Event Sites, and with me is my amazing host, Marisa Cali.
Oh, nice. Hostess with
Co-hostess.
the mostess.
Yeah. Co-hostess with the mostess. Happy to be back here with you. So we're on show 2 now. That means it's officially a show today. Before it was just like a thing, and now it's a show.
Yes, we are officially. And the reason why I was laughing, we do prep, we do show prep, and like we're in the studio for all those who don't know behind the scenes. And we're like, hey, we're ready to start. Hey, ready to start. And I'm like, I'm just going to press the button. And you were like freaking out. But yeah, this is kind of the reason why we're having this episode, because it is definitely, we can both get caught up in planning and not doing. So
a little bit of stage fright here, maybe.
You're not even live, John. Come on.
Exactly.
We can edit that out. Well, we won't.
But we should dive in. So we were after we finished the last show, we were thinking like, what ideas do we want to focus on? We have like 1 million, and we thought maybe we should prove that we actually practice what we preach and start with a show on starting with purpose, like we talked about in the beginning of the last show. Yeah. And so I think that this, for us, this live show is a great example of how we did it. Yes. The weird thing is it comes with a twist. Marisa, do you want to tell them about the twist here?
Oh, which twist? The heavenly meeting of
no,
the
not
minds?
Quite. Like just every event that you're planning, people like we can give like as much of an outline as we want of like how it's, but everybody's always going to be like, how does this fit me though? Everything's always different.
Right. When you start planning these things, you have to have some type of plan, but you also have to roll with the punches when they come and kind of accept them. And I think the first thing before we get into actual, like, we're going to talk a little bit of story of how this happened. We're also going to give you some actual questions to ask yourself, whether you're collaborating with someone or you're doing it on your own, because you can ask yourself these questions to kind of give yourself a framework. But I want to kind of highlight, John, what you were thinking about, I guess, in the beginning of the year when you're like, okay, my goals for the year are to do X, Y, Z. Then we connected. So can you tell a little bit about how it came to be?
Sure. Yeah. So coming into the year, like setting my goals in the first couple of weeks of the year.
It's angel music.
Yeah. Wanting to start a podcast or a live stream. And I'm like, I'm going to do it this year. This is going to be the year. And one day, just connected with Marisa. We talk, once every couple months at least. And she shows up in my Zoom room and she's like, John, we should start a podcast. And I was like,
yes.
Angel music. And so it had to be meant to be, right? A dream come true. In case you don't know, Marisa Cali is a pro at, like, literally helps other people do podcasts and live streams for a living. Then she shows up and said we should do one together. I was like, okay, we got to do this. But nervous we backed up for a second and just like, okay, like, is this really going to work?
Yeah.
And so that's when we started.
I think my input on that is like, we always had like, okay, we have 20-minute Zoom calls, but then they turned into like hour-long sessions of like ideas of how to like do these things better, or like, how can we do this better? And it was really getting to know you as a professional and understanding, okay, there is some alignment and I enjoy talking to you about all things business. And then I'm like, wow, we actually have a really good dynamic. I'm like, could this be a podcast? And like, you being a specialist in event sites, I'm like, there is some alignment there. And, we've talked all the things startups and being resilient. So, when it came all together, it was like a perfect thing. So thank you, universe, for
Yeah.
putting that all together. So
Happy to be here. And then, but yeah, so we backed up for a second and we wanted to check, like, is this really going to work? Like, it felt right, but we wanted to make sure it was going to be right, so it worked in the long run. Right.
Yeah. So what question? Well, like, I was really amazed by like how we prepared to get to this point before we're actually launching a live show. Before all of this, it was actually just a podcast, but we'll get into that. But what question do you think was the first most impactful one when we started having this conversation?
Sure. And for me, that was like, do we have audience overlap? Right. So Marisa, who's your audience? Like, who are you trying to reach?
So, I, like you said, I produce for, different people in different industries. They're professionals with 20 plus experience in their industry. And I have close to that. I have over 15 years in the digital marketing. And I never really was putting myself in front of the camera because I'm just so good behind the scenes, planning and all that. So my audience are professionals that are on social media because one of my goals, which we'll talk about, is building up my brand. And I think that, a lot of my friends, people that have been connected with me for a long time, they have put me in certain boxes because of what I used to do. But my goal was, to open up the door to like getting more speaking gigs and like, really talking to professionals that have been working in their industry for over 20 years because they don't want to do the things that are new and innovative now. They know that they need to get into video or podcasting or virtual events, but like they're so used to like the rat race. And so my goal for that was and I hear that from people constantly on social, like, oh, you're so active. And I'm like, literally, I only post like once or once a week, but it's like, it's very consistent and very like specific when I'm doing it. And so I was like, I need to ramp this up because I want to get in front of more people that are active on social without having to spend a ton on advertising. So.
Right.
And what about you? What was your target audience?
Right. Well, I want to back up a second and say your audience, I think some of your past clients also include like Fortune 500 companies and I know some charities.
That's just a side note.
That's just like one. You just talked about like one target, but but so our audience so far over the past few years, it's been a lot of higher education, startup accelerators. We work with charities, chambers of commerce, associations. And so it's definitely seemed like from who I've seen in your clientele in the past, it was pretty clear that that we would have an overlap there altogether.
Right. Yeah. And you're right. Like, I'm working on my brand awareness, over the years, and that's how people are finding me, or they find me through other avenues, through like recommendations, but then they can see that I'm active on social or I have good connections and my client base. And a side note on that, I don't always like say the names, like my people know the names because there's certain NDAs that I have to follow and I can't let people know like who I've worked with. And it's unfortunate sometimes I can't be like, oh, look who I've worked with, this company and that company. But when I tell people, they're like, oh, wow. Okay. And that's part of the struggle with, building a brand and kind of getting more clientele, but people know, I think.
Fair. Yeah. So next question we dove into is like, so we know what we want to get to the same audiences. And then the next question was, do we want to create the same type of content? Right. And so what content were you wanting to focus on? I know a lot of obviously starting with purpose.
Yeah. So like when I was envisioning it before, I think we talked about it. I think that's where all in my brain, I have a lot of different ideas for content. I just don't have someone to keep me accountable to continue to do it. But I basically wanted to run through all the aspects of planning, a virtual event in a virtual studio, basically everything that you would do, because that could also convert into blogs and podcasts and posts and all of that. And I knew that I had that process down because of all the clientele that I've worked with. It's just more so like, now how can I implement that and level up the type of events that I'm doing? And, you know, I don't think I have an issue with charging the rate that I deserve. It's more so like it is a little bit more of a building process of business development, because if someone gets to know me through everything that I'm sharing, then maybe they'll want to join my team, and they can, and I can focus more on business development. So that was my content kind of direction in that sense. And then for you, I don't know if did we talk about this in the beginning of in our first meeting? We talked about different content ideas. I don't remember exactly.
No, we talked about a lot of different ways to go about building the purpose behind your event and translating that into like actual which direction you want to go with your event. But so my content ideas, like what I want to be talking about a lot. One thing I'm really excited about right now, just content repurposing. So like, how do we take what we've recorded here today and turn it into something that starts paying us dividends over the next couple of years, right? How do we break that up, and how do we do it efficiently? And then for people like the entrepreneurs you work with, how do they turn that into not just live shows or live events, but on-demand content so it can continue to pay them over time, right? And then, of course, I'm super interested in hybrid events as well. We help a ton of people out with it, and I think we simplify it, but hybrid, I think, is one of those big things. It's like they call it like the Holy Grail. If you know the story of the Holy Grail, it's not just that it's like worth a lot, it's infinite life, but it's also like it'll kill you if you screw it up. So a lot of people are afraid of hybrid, but there is some easy ways to do it if you have the right approach. But so I'm interested to talk about a ton of different topics, all kind of related to capturing and reusing and making the most of these recordings that everybody's doing, right? And so
a little touch on hybrid, because I think everyone wants to have hybrid. You don't always have to do hybrid. I think a lot of people just think about it as an afterthought, because these apps where people are doing events, not yours, but like the old event apps, they're just like, ooh, let's add live streaming. But like they don't think about how that's going to work with an audience perspective, and like how is the audience going to feel included? And people are like, oh, look, we have a virtual option here, buy a ticket. But it's like, I'm not sitting in front of a screen for 6 hours and not being able to ask a question or something like that, which we'll go through a whole hybrid episode of how you can make a good hybrid event or different ways.
And I think this all comes back to like both of our long-term strategies. And like, I think it's what we've noticed in both our businesses. It's really easy to make quick money by being a cheerleader for people and just being like, sure, you want to throw in a live stream, just let's go. Why not? That client might never come back. But if you're willing to be a little bit more of a coach with them, like kind of help them move forward, then maybe they go a little bit slower, but they have more success and they end up becoming more of a long-term asset for your business, and it works out more for them, right? Yeah,
I think, that's a good point, because I had a call this morning with someone overseas, and they were like, if it sucked last year, and if it doesn't make sense for us cost-wise, but also experience-wise, we're going to cut that out.
Yeah.
And I was okay with it. Like, to me, I'm like, I'm not afraid of losing that project if they're not okay with innovating and doing something that's different from last year, and not just saying, well, we had it last year, let's just make it the same way. And I'm like, no, you didn't like it. It sucked. And I'm not going to charge you for something that I know is going to take my time and my expertise. And then have you not happy with it,
Yeah.
It's not my fault. It's the event.
And then that
would
reflect poorly on you, right? You want to have super happy clients.
Yeah, exactly.
Third part of the third major question we were thinking about, like, so do we have goal overlap? So we know that we have, we want to reach the same audiences with the same kind of content, but ultimately do our goals align?
Yeah. And I think those are a little bit different because of the structure of our current businesses. You know, like I have a good, I'm trying to build up my training modules so I can bring more people in my team and work on larger projects. So my goals were brand awareness, like we talked about before, and speaking gigs so that I could work with larger projects, and maybe being more of a manager and overseer versus the doer, which I love to do. It's fun to do this stuff, but it's, you know, sometimes can be time consuming. So those were my goals. And your goals were?
Focusing on mainly marketing, so also brand awareness, but more importantly, getting people onto our company email list, so we can start serving more people over time. I've been very product focused over the last couple of years as we shifted everything to the pandemic, and now it's time for us to start focusing a little bit more on marketing and getting the product actually into more people's hands.
Right. Which we'll talk about what that means in terms of lead gen and, you know, how can you get some measurable ROI, because there's a lot of different ways to do that. But yeah, so the 3 questions is, do we have audience overlap? Do we have content overlap? And do we have goal overlap? And you can even ask that to yourself of like, what, you know, if you ever plan to do it in a collaborative sense, or if you ever think about who you might want to have as guests. Is there, because they're going to help promote you in your live show, in your events. Who are you partnering with? Is there, those 3 questions are very important to, you know, write down and make sure that there's alignment before you get to the next step.
Right. Makes sense. And then we can talk like a little bit about those goals. So for myself, it wasn't really just about those kind of hard target goals of like growing our subscriber list, right? But also like soft targets. So being for myself, like, it's like, what can I improve professionally, right?
Yeah.
I want to be way more comfortable being on a live stream, being on a live show, creating content, and just like learning more about the overall process of creating content and planning it, producing it, promoting it. Because I think this is just, you know, I try to preach this all the time that people should be doing it. If I'm not doing it myself, it's kind of a hard sell, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And those I think are my, because I am like a solopreneur and I have an assistant, I have very, not as much, I guess, overhead or capital to really focus. I do focus on the soft targets, which, you know, it's kind of funny being comfortable on live shows. Like, honestly, like I could go on a live show if someone told me they're going to go tomorrow. Here, give me an outline, and I have a webinar that I'm doing tomorrow, and I'm like, oh, I have an outline and I know what I'm going to talk about, but it's like, that's fine because I know that I've prepared enough and my expertise is there. But also understanding the planning and the production and promotion, like you mentioned repurpose before. How can I get better at that? Where can I help promote a show or offer advice to my clientele of how to promote a show beforehand or after? And does that add to my services that I offer, or is that something where I need to partner with a good repurpose company or professional that can help get that out, you know? So those are my soft targets, because I think anytime you're learning or improving, it's really beneficial to you as an entrepreneur. But there are hard targets, I think, from a corporate standpoint that you have to focus on as well.
Yeah, eventually we all do have to earn some money, right?
Yeah. And one of the big things is like also trial period we talked about. That's a definite thing you need to, like, I've worked on projects that lasted 20 episodes. I've worked on a podcast now that's been over a year, and you know, we're just starting to get into more like, okay, how can this improve, and what do we actually graduated from audio only to video last week, so it's like okay, like how, then now we need to like up our like subscribers or up, what is our measurable goals? And those are always good to talk about, and they can change. So I think, having the goals written out and meeting constantly to talk about what those are would be beneficial for anyone.
Absolutely. And then, yeah, for us, working on that trial period, one thing that was important when you're jumping into a partnership, this is like business school 101. You got to you treat it like dating. You don't get married right away.
Yeah.
You go on some dates, propose commit to going out a few times and then going forward.
Yeah.
Right. And I've got very good feelings. I think that we're going to make it.
I mean, the universe didn't come together where I'm just like, hey, let's start a podcast.
Yeah, that's right.
But now we have a live show. Okay, so just quick things for the goals. Write them down, figure out what they mean to you, soft targets, hard targets, and then set a trial period for yourself.
There we go. Yeah.
I think a lot of people do one and then they're done. They're like, oh, no one watched. I'm like, that's not going to work.
Got to do a few. You got to get better.
Yeah.
Finally, as we discussed, so going through our case study here of like practicing what we preach, audience format match. Mm-hmm. So how did we decide that we were going to be on a live show together when we could have done all these different things, right? Mm-hmm. And so first question we started out with, of course, is who is our target audience? But so we covered that just a couple minutes ago, the types of people that we work with. But when is our target audience? It always sounds like a dumb question, but when is our audience is a weird one, but it matters, right? Yeah. And our audience is not just going to be online today. When this launches, our audience ideally is going to value this content for the next few years. Right. So having some kind of persistent approach or persistent availability of this content is super important to us.
We're Simulive, it's not a secret. There's very little editing, but like we're approaching it with providing the value and not necessarily hoping that like 20 people watch it live and then sign up to our email list and then subscribe, because it's like boom, boom, boom. Like you have to focus on the first part of it, because I think so many people just think about, oh, well, no one watched. And I was like, you don't know, people are watching. You just never know. I mean, I've got most of my clients through that. They're watching me somehow. They never interact, but
yeah,
it works.
That is establishing yourself as a professional 101, right?
Yeah,
it's just
right.
Getting into people's minds and staying there. And most people don't make decisions right away. They won't sign up for your email list on the first show, and they won't sign up for your product after the first email. Yeah. But if you can constantly remind people, you build expertise over time, right?
Oh yeah. It's just do your best and constantly remind people. And then getting back to the who, what, when, where, like where's your audience?
Right.
They're everywhere. They're all over.
Yeah, but I'd say mostly North America for both of us, right? Mm-hmm. And so it makes sense. Our show goes live during the workday each day. Yeah. Each time that it goes live, right? And then it'll be available, and it's on a network where it's on a network that's similarly aligned, right? So ideally, their audiences are going to overlap with ours a little as well.
There's some advantages to that, and that's by building relationships in the professional content creation world. I mean, is that a thing? Professional content creation? Yes.
Absolutely.
And, getting through the first, initial application, so to say. We haven't created content together where people could see it and say, oh, yes, for sure. But whatever we've done in general has paid off.
And I think when that came up, we did look back at our goals. Like there was this offer to be on the 100 TV network. And it was like, that's exciting again, but you can't just grab every exciting thing. But by being able to look back at our goals, it was pretty clear, because you know what? Ultimately, I think it's going to help us reach more people faster. And really great for us, it gave us deadlines. Again,
oh my gosh,
here we are moving faster.
There's no way.
I wasn't even ready, and Marisa just presses record and says go, instead of us getting the perfect outline of our show ready.
Yeah. And we have an outline, but it works, because I think, it helps us with we know more than what we think we know. Just same with any entrepreneur that might be thinking about this. You know more than what you think you know. So get a framework and then start doing, because I think we probably wouldn't even have recorded one episode if we didn't have these deadlines. So there's no
Thank
way.
you, Ross Brand.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, thinking about who, what, when, where, why, and always revisiting your purpose, your goals, your content, every decision you make, and make the decision. Don't overplan or overthink it. I think because only know how long that thinking process should be.
Totally.
No
Better
one else
to
does.
take the wrong path and then change course or adjust than to never start at all, right?
Right. Exactly. Wow. Look at us philosophers here.
Yeah.
Or so, quote that. All right. So
move over, Socrates.
Yeah. All right. Let's do a wrap up of what we, how does going through this process answer this question? How does going this process make our businesses, both of us, together as Resilient Events co-hosts, but also your business become more resilient in just doing stuff like this?
Right. And for us this time, we're obviously very, very busy people, and probably most of our listeners are as well. Hey, we love what we do. So busy is not as a bad word sometimes, but we love being busy.
Yes.
But so instead of just jumping into this and maybe it being, because we took so much time to make sure that it was going to work for us in the long run, we know that it's at least going to work for us for this trial period that we've set. Like, we know that we're going to be consistent, even if we don't make $1 million from it tomorrow, even if you don't get paid $50,000 to be on stage next week, we're going to stick with it because we know, like, deep down, that this is going to make sense for both of us. So it makes us more ready to take the changes and the difficulties that we might face moving forward.
Yeah. I totally agree. And then for me, what I think about is like, what's next for us? Because we've done a lot of planning, we started doing. Now, how do we evaluate? We're going to get 2 episodes in, and then hopefully by the end of the week, we'll get maybe 3. I don't know. But yeah, it's what's next. We're, full disclosure, we're running behind on calls to action, and what's next, like, okay, we got the first part of it down. I think this is something for anyone that might be thinking about this. Always think about a call to action.
Yeah. And so to explain that briefly, it's just like, what do you want? If you could get your audience to do one thing, what would that one thing be? And then how do you make it extremely easy for them to do and make them really want to do it?
Yeah. Well, we're on the 100 TV network, so the call to action is hit subscribe.
That's our CTA for today.
Super easy. Yeah. And we will have another episode in just another week. And we're probably going to be talking about calls to action and what does that mean, from all the different options and why you need to do it and when you need to do it. We can provide some value to you. Any last words, John?
Thank you for being here. Can you play the Heavenly Choir again?
Yes. Yay.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you all for watching. We will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye. All right.